You're the board of directors for General Mills.
Of General Mills?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you hear this, it'll be 9 minutes.
Thank you. Do I hand them over? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Allison Leggett, and this is my colleague Samantha Grier. So, to start off, we want to thank you, the Board of Directors of General Mills, for inviting LME Consulting to readdress the ethical dimensions behind your marketing to children. This gesture speaks worldly to your efforts and your willingness to adapt your brand to support and suit the consumer's needs. And we commend you for this. And in our previous topic in our discussion, we addressed the complaints regarding the parents who believed that your cereals contain high sugar contents that compromise their children's health. We uncovered that your successful marketing strategies included engaging the consumer through colorful box art, and as well as maintaining brand loyalty by using popular cartoon characters and also maintaining an internet presence. However, we found that the real ethical issue lies not in your marketing strategies to children, but actually in the products that you are promoting to these children. I will first elaborate on the ethical issues behind the health risks that are associated with excessive sugar intake. Samantha will then elaborate on the present recommendations that we have in order to continue to have General Mills promote their values for trust, care of the consumer, and respect, and as well as to remain a leader within the food and beverage industry. So first I'll talk about the ethical issues behind this. So first, children's brains are not fully developed. In fact, the brain develops from the back to the forward direction. This leaves children at an increased vulnerability because the brain doesn't fully develop until the age of 25. And this is because the prefrontal cortex at the front end of the brain is actually predominantly important for controlling emotional impulses and reactions. And therefore, when children see these colorful box art and these colorful characters, they don't have the capacity to make the decision regarding their health in the future. Instead, they resort to our natural tendency to like sugar and foods that are sugar rich. And this leaves children at the increased vulnerability to not be able to make the decision, and they resort to emotional connections. And the result of this is children are conditioned to like these foods that are promoted by General Mills because of the characters and because of the advertising techniques that you use. And as we mentioned, the ethical issue doesn't lie in the advertising, but in the products, because research has shown that excessive sugar consumption can lead to a variety of adverse health, physical and health effects. So the three issues I'll be talking about is acute dopamine release. I will also talk about obesity and related conditions, and I will address dental cavities. So to begin, acute dopamine, elevated dopamine release. So dopamine can be thought of as a happy chemical. When this chemical is released in the brain, it produces a feeling of satisfaction. And when children and humans in general intake these foods that are high in sugar, dopamine is released in the short term, and this produces a temporary happy satisfaction. And the sugar rush that we all know and love. However, in the long term, with this continual excretion of dopamine in the brain, which actually is excreted into an area known as the striatum, which is primarily involved in the reward system in our brain, this actually resorts in the brain forming a defense mechanism and actually decreasing the amount of dopamine receptors in the brain. And this actually produces the feelings of cravings and the commonly signs and symptoms that are associated with addiction. And sugar addiction is an actual phenomenon that scientific research will back up. In addition, because of the depressed prefrontal cortex development in children, as well as the overconsumption of these sugars, this will eventually lead to obesity and related conditions, because the children aren't able to take into account short-term desires as well as long-term adverse effects. And lastly, I talked about the physiological effects, but not necessarily the mental effects, and that is just as important. And children who are eating or consuming a larger amount of sugar actually have a lowered ability for cognitive functioning. They've been shown to have a lower academic performance. So So this is not only just affecting their physical health, but it's also affecting their ability to succeed in the future. In addition, children who have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, commonly known as ADHD, have been shown to actually have worsening symptoms with increased sugar consumption. Secondly, I would like to address obesity and related conditions. Since 1974, the rates of childhood obesity have skyrocketed, almost tripled in size. And what's the most concerning fact about this? Yes, obesity is meaning that you have excess fat. What this really means is that children are at increased susceptibility for developing the related conditions. This means that children at the ages of 7 and 8 are being diagnosed with diabetes, high blood pressure, and are having heart attacks and all the associated conditions with childhood obesity. Do we really want our children having this decreased quality of life and having a shorter lifespan, which has been predicted by the Surgeon General, Richard Carmona? I don't think so. And lastly, I'll be talking about dental cavities. With an increased consumption of sugar, there has been an increased risk for dental cavities. And what's really daunting about this fact is that dental cavities, even though they might affect the baby teeth, actually affect the underlying teeth, which will lead to chronic dental problems. And so this is really, these health concerns are not just affecting the short-term population, but they're affecting the lives of these future and our future generation. And so with that, I will leave this off to Sam to address our possible solutions for this issue.
Thank you, Allison. I'd like to start by saying that General Mills has not gone without progress. Your company has previously expressed concern about the startling impacts of sugar that Allison just outlined. Since 2004, General Mills has increased its research and development spending by 75%. However, your company has recently claimed that it has hit a plateau in the reformulation of your cereals. Even with your Big G Kids cereals containing 10 grams of sugar or less, which we acknowledge is a wonderful start to improving the nutritional value of your cereals, our company is still concerned that the targeted consumers, children aged 12 and under, do not encompass the full spectrum of vulnerable youth, that current serving sizes are deceiving and do not account for realistic portions, and marketing transparency does not take into account the age range of the children you are advertising to. When considering the nutritional value of your cereals, I'd like to remind you that while a recommended serving size is 3/4 of a cup, the Journal of Pediatrics states that children pour on average 61 grams of sugar-rich cereals. I have this demonstrated here in these bags of Lucky Charms. This is the recommended serving size on a box of Lucky Charms cereal. As you can see, it hardly covers the bottom of the bowl and is not a realistic portion size. 1 2/3 cup is the amount of cereal that children on average consume per day. As you can see, this is a much more realistic serving size and something that we might pour for ourselves. Unfortunately, that serving size contains a staggering amount of 6 teaspoons of sugar for breakfast alone. Taking these concerns into consideration, we want to provide you with 2 solutions, a short-term and long-term solution that will benefit your company ethically, financially, and legally. Our first solution is short-term, and it involves converting your current child-targeted marketing strategies to your pre-existing healthier cereals. We believe that this will allow your company to experiment with the success of marketing healthier options to kids. We view this simply as a transfer of funds. A pediatrician and child obesity specialist cited that cereal companies spend on average $156 million annually on commercials targeted to children. We simply ask that you move this funding that is already being designated towards your healthier cereals. I'd like to remind you of the study that we mentioned before involving 2 boxes of cereals being presented to kids. This was conducted by the University of Pennsylvania and was presented with a box of cereal that read Healthy Bits and a box of cereal that was read Sugar Bits. The kids chose the box of cereal that read Healthy Bits. Kids want the healthier option. However, when cartoon characters were introduced to the box, the kids chose the box of cereal with the cartoon regardless of its perceived health effects. What's the moral of the story? Kids will overlook the health value of a product if there's a character on the box. Our second solution involves reducing the sugar content of your already branded cereals. We view this as a long-term solution because it requires the time to reformulate your brand. You might be wondering how we do this. Well, we suggest using the stealth approach to eliminating sugar, which has been successfully used by your competitors, Kellogg's and Kraft Foods. This involves reducing the amount of sugar gradually over time, and so that the consumer does not perceive the difference. We also recommend that you change the location of the sugar. By putting the sugar coating on the outside of your cereals, kids do register that the cereal is actually sweeter than it is. We also want you to encourage you to use natural flavorings such as vanilla and cinnamon that don't contain processed sugars. Again, although claim that you've reached this plateau, there's plenty of room for growth. Cereals marketed to kids have 85% more sugar, 65% less fiber, and 60% more sodium, according to a study conducted by the Yale Red Center. Based on the success of your healthier cereals, we don't believe that you need to sacrifice flavor for nutritional value. Our solutions will allow you to market your company at the forefront of the health movement, which appeals to your actual consumers, the parents. It'll allow you to promote your company values of trust, respect, and care for the consumer, and greatly reduce your risk of lawsuits, which can cost you millions of dollars. In summary, we have found that your company's use of advertising to promote unhealthy products to children, who, as Allison said, due to prolonged brain development, are not at the capacity to make decisions apart from emotional responses. This circumvents parenting, jeopardizes the quality of life of the kids that you are targeting, and puts your company at risk for scrutiny. With rising awareness of the health epidemic and the additional health risks associated with excessive sugar consumption, there's been the rise of a new movement focused on nutrition. We want General Mills to be at the forefront of this movement. We encourage you to be a leader in the industry and hope that our solutions allow you to successfully prioritize what is at the core of your mission statement, the well-being of your consumers. We believe that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Well, you're giving me a hard job. Which is exactly what you should do. So these comments are not ranking the teams in any way whatsoever. They're just comments regarding each presentation. LaSalle, I was on the Uber presentation. I like the fact that you focused your remarks on two arenas, privacy and transparency, and you built your ethical case around those two. Because for the listener, it makes it less complex and easier to understand what an ethical solution might look like. I was impressed by the point about creating a competitor. That's an interesting observation to make in an ethics presentation, that you've actually created a competitor for ethical reasons, but it has economic implications as well. Florida, your presentation on Walmart. What I particularly appreciated about your presentation was you focused on a culture of mistrust. And oftentimes the most serious ethical issues for companies are cultural rather than a specific behavioral issue. I would contrast, for example, your comments on culture with LMU's most recent talk about a very specific issue about sugar and children and brain development and all that. The complaint ethically about General Mills was not a cultural complaint so much as it was a product-related complaint. But in your case, it was a matter of how do you turn a culture around? And I imagine in your 30-minute presentation you talk more about that. But if you've created certain mistrust among employees and eventually among consumers, it's going to take time to get the kind of change that you're suggesting that the